Ryan Neiman, Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, today's newsmakers, and you. The Morning Majority, 630.
It is 8:37. Boy, there is a lot of news out there. Political news. Newt's campaign meltdown. Is Perry from Texas going to get into the race? What about Rudy? Romney pulls out of the straw poll in Iowa, suggesting that maybe T-Paw has the juice there in that state. Who better to bring in for a discussion of all things political than my old buddy, BRET BAIER from the Fox News Channel. Brett, how are you today?
Good morning.
Good to have you with us. Okay, where do we start? The mutiny, everybody's calling it, to the departure of 16 members of Newt Gingrich's staff. What do you make of this?
Well, it's obviously significant. Obviously, Newt Gingrich says he's going to continue on, but many are wondering how that's possible. We talked a lot about the first week of the launch of his campaign, arguably one of the worst launches in recent memory of a candidate. But this really kind of topped the Sunday, if you will, because when the entire staff, senior staff, and these are guys, consultants in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, big-time people who make the trains run in those states for a candidate leave, it seems like there's not a lot of hope for the campaign, although he says he's pushing on.
And do we draw from this that Perry is definitely getting in?
I don't know if it's directly from this, Brian, but I do hear anecdotally that he is very close to pulling the trigger, and obviously a couple of the folks on Gingrich's staff will likely work with Perry.
I'm interested in what Gingrich will be asked at the debate on Monday. I'm wondering what you would ask if you were at the debate.
Yeah, Mary Catherine, I think that it's really one of the first questions that you have to ask. I mean, it would be kind of a wild card. Before we get into Medicare, Newt Gingrich, former speaker, you have no campaign staff.
Exactly.
I'm literally thinking that's one of the first questions.
Well, no, he says it's all going to start anew on Sunday, though.
In Los Angeles? A Republican candidate launching in Los Angeles.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Maybe he'll be forced to put out his own press releases.
Maybe Callisto wanted to go to L.A.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head there, Brian. It's that most stories now are pointing to a rift between the campaign and Callista Gingrich.
Reminiscent of the Fred Thompson campaign.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I just think what's interesting about it is that he is such a solutions guy, an ideas guy. Many people thought that even if the campaign was not going to go all the way to the end, that it would be good to have him in just to talk about possible ideas for Republicans to use. I don't know if it's going to get that far.
Man, Robert Gates is really letting people have it as he's leaving. Well, at least I shouldn't say that. He's very candid, or has been the last couple of months, with the way he sees the world and the way he sees the way the United States military should be used. And he essentially said, you know what, NATO's not worth it for us anymore, for the United States, and we're not going to essentially, control NATO and pony up all the money for them and be the only one involved. And if you guys don't get more involved, especially with money, then you know what, this thing is not going to last. The significance of those quotes from Gates today.
Really pointed. And we've seen defense secretaries, listen, I traveled with Defense Secretary Rumsfeld 5 times over to Brussels in this same kind of defense ministers meeting there. And every year there would be a line or two in a speech, a paragraph about how NATO has paper armies and needs to back up with money what it says on paper. This is the most pointed I've seen. And essentially he's saying, listen, I'm one of the old guys. I'm 20 years older than my president. And the nostalgic tie to NATO is probably going to go away with me.
Do you think when these comments are that sharp, that he has to run those through the White House first, or is it just Bob Gates, just sounding off? And
he really doesn't have any much to lose right now.
I guess he doesn't, but I'm just wondering, when you're that sharp with your criticism of NATO, I wonder if he gave a heads up from the White House, or maybe the White House wanted him to say it.
Yeah, I think it's a message that the White House would embrace, even though it's a little harsher than perhaps the diplomatic version would be. The other thing was on Libya. He points out there's 300 sorties a day, that NATO can barely struggle to get 150 of these things going, and it's 11 weeks into an operation against a poorly armed regime in a sparsely populated country, yet the Allies are running short on munitions, and the U.S. has to come in and pay for them. I mean, that's pretty pointed.
I got to ask you about Wiener mainly Do you think he'll resign? Is he out by this afternoon? Brian Neiman is of the mind that he will be.
Well, I was earlier. I'm not convinced anymore, but I'm going to stick with it.
Yeah. You know what, Brian? I'm kind of with you.
All right.
I think that the pressure will build from the Democratic Party, and Nancy Pelosi will be the one that makes the...
You think she'll lower the hammer?
I think she will.
If she hasn't done it so far, why do it now?
Well, I mean, she has a press conference today.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's
supposed
interesting.
to be about jobs and the economy.
That's not what it's going to be about,
Something
though.
tells me it won't be about
No,
that.
it won't be about that at all.
So how many press conferences do you have to go through as a Democratic leader before you say, this is a major distraction?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that's my guess. I think if it was left up to Anthony Weiner, he'd be there, through the end of his term. I think he'll get redistricted out in New York. I think they'll take that district away. They have to lose 2 congressional districts up there. That might be one of them.
Well, you've seen it 1,000 times, the Friday 5 or 6 p.m. announcement.
Yeah.
This is what I sort of thought would happen. But given all of the news that's happened where he says he's not backing down and the polls that say he stands at 56% in his district, I'm not sure he's going to give up.
Yeah, but you know how the difference between the Chris Lee thing and this, where apparently Speaker Boehner calls Lee and says, you need to be out?
Mm-hmm.
The difference between this of kind of languishing, I think Democratic leaders are starting to get a little pain about how they're handling it, and it may build up.
All right. I have to ask you, I watched your special on Memorial Day when you were riding mountain bikes with President Bush and the Wounded Warriors. It was really fun to watch. I'm curious, have you gotten back on a bike since that trip?
I have not, Brian. I have not gotten back on a bike, and it doesn't have to do with an injury or anything, but I haven't. But I plan to.
And did you have to have a deep massage after that? I mean, they ran you in the ground, didn't they?
60 miles in the Texas heat. They kicked my butt. They really did. And those guys, the Wounded Warriors, they're doing it without limbs.
Yeah, I know.
And really something.
That was amazing. Good TV, too. Thanks, Brett, as always. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, we'll see you guys.
Brett Baier, Fox News Channel. You can watch him 6 o'clock on Fox, Anchor Special Report. We'll check in with traffic and weather in 1 minute, 8:44 on WM.